The time for 2-minute statements has expired. We move to question time, and I call Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Senator Farrell. What is the precise process and timeline the Albanese Labor government will now apply to determining a site for the long-term storage of Australia's low-level radioactive waste?
Senator Farrell.
Thank you, President. And thank Senator Birmingham for his question. As he will know, the difficult issue of finding a site for holding particularly low-level nuclear waste has been a perplexing issue for a very, very long period of time. The issue, of course, was raised first, as I recall.
Senator Farrell, please resume your seats. Senator Birmingham.
President, this was a very narrow question with no preamble, and the precise subject matter of this question was about the process and timeline the Albanese Labor government will now apply. It made no historical references, no references to past decisions.
Yes,
it was
Senator
only
Birmingham.
a question looking forward, and I would invite, knowing how long it takes this minister to answer questions,
Senator
I would
Birmingham.
invite you to draw him
Senator
to
Birmingham.
the question immediately.
Thank you. I remind order. Order. Leaders are given some licence. Order across the chamber. But I will call the minister. I will call the Minister Farrell to your question, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And look, the Minister King has obviously had some very difficult issues to resolve, and she confirmed this morning in the House that the government will not appeal the decision in respect to the judicial review that took place as to the selection site of Kimba in South Australia. She's instructed her department to develop a policy option for managing Commonwealth radioactive waste into the future. And this policy development is ongoing. Minister King said she— Well, you didn't fix it. I mean, all those 9 years, Senator Birmingham, you had an opportunity to fix it, and you did not. You didn't fix the problem, and you've left it to us to fix. Madeleine King.
Senator Farrell, order. I'm waiting for silence before I call the minister. Minister Farrell.
Madeleine King has been left with the job like so many other issues.
Minister Farrell, resume your seat. Order. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thank you for that protection too. Like so many other issues, for 9 years you had to fix this problem, and you left us in a situation. You left us in a situation.
Minister Farrell, thank you. I'm waiting for silence before I call Senator Birmingham. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. The Albanese government has taken the weak and irresponsible path of junking years of work to resolve a decades-long impasse on where to store Australia's low-level radioactive waste. If the government didn't want to appeal the court decision regarding the Napandi site near Kimba, why didn't it legislate a remedy to address the court decision and allow the Napandi site to proceed as planned and on time?
Thank you. Order. Senators. Order. Senator Wong and Senator Birmingham. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Birmingham for his first supplementary question. If this issue was so simple, then in the 9 years that you had to deal with it, you would have solved the problem, and you didn't. And why do we have this issue right now? We have this issue right now because under judicial review, a determination was made to overturn the site on Kimber. Now,
Minister Farrell, resume your seat. Senator Scarr, I've called Senator Wong. Senator Wong. Senator Scarr and Senator Wong. Senator Scarr, your voice has been the loudest so far. I would invite you at some other time to make a contribution on the issue. Chiming in at question time is not the time. Minister Farrell.
Well, look, there's been a court decision. That decision has been in favour of the Bangala people, and the government, particularly Minister King, understands fully the need to deal with this serious issue, but she was left in this situation because of the mishandling.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Birmingham, second supplement.
Thanks, President. President, if Labor can't manage to decide where to store gloves used in nuclear medicine procedures, how can anyone have confidence that it can manage the difficult decisions that are going to be required to deliver nuclear submarines under the AUKUS agreement? Isn't the truth that this change of policy at this time to junk the Napandi site is just another example of appeasing the left-wing factions ahead of the National Conference next week and putting Labor's internal divisions ahead of addressing the national interest?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister, I haven't called. Order. Order. I'm not calling the minister until there's silence. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator Birmingham for his second supplementary question? Well, if I was you, Senator Birmingham, I wouldn't be talking about internal party factions, because I can see Senator Antic up the back there. I can see Senator Ruston and where else? With Senator Fawcett. Senator Fawcett. If you think that this has got anything to do with internal factions, think again. You're the party that's bitterly divided. You're the party.
Resume your seat. Senator Cash, you do not have the call. I'm waiting for silence. I have your leader on his feet. Senator Birmingham.
President, these are serious issues to deal with a decades-long problem around nuclear waste related to AUKUS. And now we've got.
I've called you 3 times. Are you calling for a point of order?
Point of order relates to direct relevance, President. Question goes to the serious issues around the long-term issues of storing nuclear waste related to AUKUS.
Senator Birmingham, please resume your seat. I am going to respond. In your question, Senator Birmingham, there was a preamble. It went to the waste, it went to submarines, it went to factions and internal issues within the Labor Party. The minister is being directly relevant. Minister Farrell, please continue.
Thank you, President. And look, if there's any government that's going to be capable of delivering on the AUKUS nuclear submarines for South Australia, it's this government. It's this government. And I don't think you've got. Well, I can.
Senator Birmingham.
I can remember exactly what Mike Rann did, but who introduced the act that started the process to find this?
Thank you, Minister
It was the
Farrell.
Labor Party.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. This week is National Homelessness Week, which is putting the spotlight on the need for social housing as a long-term solution. Many homelessness service providers have spoken about the challenges facing Australians who are without safe and secure accommodation. Can the Minister explain what actions the Albanese government is taking to improve housing outcomes for Australians at risk of homelessness, both now and into the future?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I'm very pleased to take that question from Senator Grogan, who is someone who has worked for Australians who are struggling for so much of her life, both in the trade union movement, also in the social services sector, and I know has such a personal commitment to improving housing and ending homelessness in this country. And her commitment is shared by other members of our government. We want to ensure every Australian has a roof over their heads, and we know far too many Australians are facing homelessness. And I commend the work of the Housing Minister. I commend the work of all those across governments, across civil society, businesses and charities who are working together to end homelessness. Access to housing is central to Labor's values, from the Prime Minister, who, as we know, grew up in social housing, to every member of our caucus who understands how important housing is. It is disappointing that the decade of inaction by those opposite has left this country in the position it has when it comes to safe and affordable homes. We were elected with a plan to help turn this tide, and a key part of the housing agenda is the development of a national housing and homelessness plan. Following the launch of the issues paper this week, public and stakeholders are invited to share their experiences, their expertise. And by working together, we can ensure the plan will set out a shared national vision and strategy for how we can together better support those in need. We want to hear from as many people and organisations as possible. I welcome comments like the Property Council, who said the federal government are leaning into the challenge. I welcome the comments from the Liberal government in Tasmania, who said we welcome the National Housing and Homeless Plan issues paper released today to mark the start of Homelessness Week. We are committed to improving outcomes for Australians facing homelessness.
Thank you, Minister Wong. The time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
That's great to hear that the Housing and Homelessness Plan is out for consultation and people can have their say about this critical issue. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said that there had been very positive and constructive discussions with the states and territories to boost housing supply. Can the minister explain what further actions the Albanese government is taking to improve housing outcomes for Australians?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Wong, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. As Senator Grogan would be aware, we are pursuing a comprehensive set of measures to improve the availability of housing in this country. This includes an investment of $2 billion in social housing and reintroducing the $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund, along with more than $500 million in investment in social and affordable rental homes through the National Housing Infrastructure Facility. If I can go back to the $2 billion that I referenced earlier, the Social Housing Accelerator payment is a payment to the state and territory governments. It will create thousands of rental homes for Australians on social housing waiting lists. Next week, the Prime Minister will be meeting with First Ministers to have positive and constructive discussions. And our priority for this meeting is very clear. It's about increasing housing supply and housing affordability across this country. National Cabinet will be considering ways to improve planning and renters' rights. After a wasted decade, we don't want to waste a day.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you. I thank the minister. That certainly sounds like some progress is finally being made. Can the minister provide an update on the crisis and transitional accommodation support that the Albanese government's ambitious housing reform agenda will provide, and also advise the Senate about any risks that there may be to the government's plan?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Wong.
Well, we know that the housing crisis that Australians are struggling with was as a consequence of those opposite neglecting this area of policy, and in particular neglecting those most in need. And I would invite the opposition to put people before politics, not politics before people. And we would invite them to stop playing games with the Housing Australia Future Fund. In its first 5 years, this fund will deliver 20,000 social housing properties, 4,000 properties for women and children fleeing domestic violence and older women who are at risk of homelessness, $100 million for crisis and transitional housing for women and children, and $30 million to build more housing for veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness. So we're talking about families fleeing domestic violence, we're talking about older women who are at risk of homelessness, we're talking about crisis housing and housing for veterans. And we would say to the opposition, you should put people before politics.
Thank you, Minister Wong. The time has expired. Senator Cadell.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. In response to the government's decision to reject Qatar Airways' application for additional flights, the Chief Executive of the Australian Airports Association, James Goodwin, stated that, I quote, "The Qatar situation sends a really bad signal for anyone wanting to do business in Australia. People are getting nervous now." Industry sources suggest the government's decision will cost between $540 and $788 million annually in less activity. That represents thousands of job opportunities in tourism, hospitality, freight, logistics ripped away from Australian families at a time of economic uncertainty. Minister, what economic advice did the government consider on the impact of employment across these sectors when making the Qatar Airways decision? What organisations provided the advice, and will you make that advice available to the Senate?
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Minister Wong.
Thank you.
Senator McKenzie, I'm waiting for silence before I call the minister again. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank the senator for his question, and I think the decision in question, obviously, from recollection, is a decision of Minister Catherine King, obviously not the Prime Minister, but I'm happy to take the question, notwithstanding the fact of that decision. The government is committed to continuing the growth of Australia's international air services, providing additional support opportunities for trade and tourism whilst maintaining a strong Australian-based aviation sector. I understand that the government has decided not to approve the Qatar Civil Aviation Authority request for additional services at this time. I am also advised that we've got about over 100 air services agreements with other countries, and will be seeking bilateral negotiations with other key international priority markets over the next year. Obviously, these decisions are considered when such decisions are made. Obviously, there are a range of factors which are considered in determining whether an expansion of bilateral air rights is in Australia's national interest. I would make the point that Senator Farrell has made that international—
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
Point of order on question of direct relevance. Again, the specific matters contained in Senator Cadell's question went to description of economic activity lost as a result of the decision and asking specifically about economic advice the government considered and received. The minister has not touched on those economic impacts at all at this stage. I ask you to draw her to the question.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham, and I note that there was a considerable preamble and the minister has addressed those points, and I will remind her of the latter part of the question.
Well, on the point of order, I'm actually showing the senator a courtesy by answering in the Prime Minister's portfolio. I started the answer, so this is on the point of order, yes. President. I started the answer with a reminder to the senator that the decision, as I recall it, and I might be wrong, was actually made by Minister King. So, may I finish? May I finish?
Order. Order.
All right. If you want to talk, maybe would you like to talk?
Senators, order. Order. Please resume your seat. Yes, Minister Wong.
To show a degree of courtesy to Senator Cadell. It is not a decision. He's asking details about a decision that is made in another portfolio, and I'm seeking to respond as best I can on the broader policy point.
Thank you, Minister Wong. I note that you did make that immediate point when you stood to answer the question. Senator Cadell, are you on a point of order, or I'll invite— I'm not sure if Minister Wong has finished her contribution. Thank you.
I will continue. I am advised that, well, coming back to the point that Senator Farrell made yesterday, international travel is recovering strongly. I know Senator Cadell talked about economic impact. I understand to the end of year, ending January 2023, over 21 million passenger movements in and out of Australia in that year. So that's an increase of in excess of 1,000% over the previous year, ending January 2022. So we are obviously on a much better path as a consequence of the post-COVID recovery.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Cadell, first supplement.
Thank you, President. What economic advice did the Prime Minister consider on the impact of national economic growth and to our high-value export industries, including the farming sector, when making the Qatar Airways decision? Will the minister table that economic advice to the Prime Minister or Cabinet to the Senate?
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Minister Wong.
Well, I don't think any minister tables anything that's gone to Cabinet, but I'll again try and do you the courtesy of a response, and the Prime Minister's focus on the strength of the Australian economy, of making sure we do, in the face of some challenging economic circumstances globally, we are very focused on ensuring we maximise Australia's growth, maximise the benefit to Australians of that economic growth. I'm asked about international issues. Obviously, one of the reasons we have worked very hard to stabilise the relationship with China is we recognise that it is important for us to seek to have those trade impediments removed, which is of benefit to the Australian economy. In relation to the question asked, I again remind the senator, as I understand it, no one's gainsaid me, the decision under legislation is Minister Catherine King's.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Cadell, second supplementary.
The government has been unable to or unwilling to justify the specific reasons for the decision to reject Qatar Airways for the additional flights. Can the minister assure the Senate that neither the Prime Minister nor the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government had any meetings or discussions with any major domestic carrier about the Qatar application prior to making the decision on Qatar Airways, and specifically what role did the PM play in the decision, if any?
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Minister Wong.
Well, again, I think the decision is made, is legislative, statutorily the decision for Minister King. But
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie.
And the minister did say "but" as soon as I stood up. So I was just going to say we don't need to know. We know who has the statutory responsibility. Our question has continually been, what role did the Prime Minister play, and what role did Qantas lobbying play in the government's decision?
Senator McKenzie, I'll remind you that Senator Cadell's question did reference, along with the Prime Minister, the Infrastructure Minister. Minister Wong, please continue.
Well, I think the decision, the question asks for a range of matters that are within the decision-making purview of Minister Catherine King. As I have said to you, Senator, there are obviously national interest considerations that any minister takes into account. In terms of meetings, I think anybody in this place knows that the aviation sector is not backward in coming forward in putting their view to all senators and members, and I would be surprised if most people in this place at some point have not had a view put to us by various parts of the aviation sector. I didn't actually go to the to the event, but I understand.
Senator Colbeck.
But I would make the point that the aviation industry is an industry that is very clear about its views.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Waters.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Public trust in our democracy is at an all-time low, and the community feel less and less confident that their representatives represent them as opposed to political donors. The Big Four consultancy firms donated more than $4.3 million to both sides of politics over the last 10 years, and they secured $8 billion in government contracts over that same time period, work that could and should be done by a strong independent public service. Polling this week found that there is an overwhelming national support, including from 70% of Labor voters, for a ban on political donations from any organisation that receives funding from government contracts. When will the government listen to the majority of its voters and ban donations from organisations seeking or holding government contracts?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I'm happy to take the question, but and I'm very pleased you like asking me questions. But this is obviously within Senator Farrell's portfolio as the Special Minister of State. But I will do my best to respond. I will do my best to respond to you, Senator Waters. You are correct. I think people have been appalled by some of the reports that we have had about the behaviour of some of those firms. And senators have rightly, including Senator O'Neill and others, have rightly made comment about that. In relation to a comment about the public service, I think Senator Gallagher, as Minister for Finance and for the Public Service, is working very hard to strengthen the public service, because we do share the view you've put about the importance of a capable and independent public service. In relation to the political donation point, I understand the JSCEM, the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Reform, provided an interim report. It has recommended introducing real-time disclosure of political donations and lowering the disclosure threshold. I understand that this report is something that Senator Farrell will be and is discussing with all parties represented in this place. And I hope that we can see appropriate reforms arising out of the JSCEM report that are capable of being supported by parties across this chamber, because I agree with you, donations do go to both perceived and actual, the perceived integrity of the democracy and of voting. And we saw, particularly in the last election, some very large donations from some individuals obviously had
Thank you,
effect.
Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Gas Corporation Tambora and Resources, who want to open up the Beetaloo Basin, which would be a climate bomb, donated $200,000 to both big parties in 2021-22. In that same financial year, Tamboran received a grant of $7.5 million of public money for natural gas exploration at the Beetaloo. The Greens attempted to disallow that, but both big parties backed it in. When will the government end the perception of being for sale by banning political donations from organisations seeking government grants?
Time. Minister Wong.
Well, again, I would urge Senator Waters to recall that there are decisions that parties of government make, and I can't speak for the coalition, but I can speak for the Labor Party, are made on the basis of our assessment of the right policy outcome and the right outcome for the country. And I appreciate Senator Waters may not agree with some of those decisions. That's why she leads the Greens in this chamber and why I lead the Labor Party in this chamber. We have different views about the way forward for the country. So not every decision that you disagree with, that we make, even if you vehemently disagree with it, is because we've had a donation. And I think the implication that in fact, sometimes the accusation from the Greens that suggests that is wrong. But I do agree that a system of a more transparent and accountable system in our of donations is a good thing.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. Donations to political parties shouldn't be able to buy government contracts or grants, and nor should they be able to buy environmental approvals. Adani and its subsidiaries donated $250,000 to the coalition in the same year as it received its final environmental approvals for its mega mine. When will the government ban political donations from corporations seeking environmental approval?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Wong.
Well, again, I'd refer to my previous answer, and I would make the point, although far be it for me to defend decisions a coalition made, but obviously there is the EPBC Act provides the Minister of the Day with statutory obligations and a discretion. That is why the context in which decisions are made. But the senator correctly identifies it is important that the principle of transparency and accountability across our electoral system and particularly in relation to donations is optimised. And I've no doubt that Senator Farrell, who is a very consultative minister in relation to this issue, understands the importance of negotiating and discussing this matter with parties. I hope that we can see cross-party agreement around reforms as we go forward.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Green.
My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. Recently, we have taken some significant and important steps in stabilising our relationship with China and removing some of the trade impediments that were hurting Australian businesses across a range of industries, including coal, timber and barley. In regions like tropical North Queensland, the slow return of visitors from China has held back the full recovery of the region's tourism industry. Can the Minister please update the Senate on any progress towards the recovery of Chinese tourism to Australia, particularly the regions?
Thank you, Senator Green. I'm just waiting for order across the chamber. Order. Order. Minister Farrell.
President. Can I thank Senator Green for her question, and I note that she's a very passionate supporter of the tourism industry in the tropical North Queensland and indeed right across the Sunshine State. And of course it's been an eventful week on the trade front. As a result of the hard work by the government and industry, Australian barley growers can now re-enter the Chinese market. And it's good news for obviously our agricultural sector, but equally good news for Chinese beer drinkers. But that is not all. About 5 minutes ago, the Chinese government has announced Australia's re-inclusion on the improved destination status outbound group travel scheme known as ADS.
Minister Farrell.
ADS.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Watt, slapping the desk is particularly disorderly. Order. Order. Minister Farrell.
Thank you. Thank you. This is very welcome news to our tourism industry because it means group tours from China will soon be returning to Australia in great numbers. Based on the pre-pandemic trends, this means hundreds of thousands of additional visitors each year who will collectively spend more than $500 million each year in Australia. The Chinese government suspended the ADS scheme globally in late 2020 as the COVID-19 pandemic took hold. Until now, Australia has not been re-included in China's list of approved I know you don't like this news. I know you don't like this good news for Queensland Senator Canavan, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Until now, Australia had not been re-included in China's list of approved destinations for a pilot resumption of the ADS. So we welcome our inclusion and we welcome Chinese group tours visitors back to Australia, including in Queensland, where you come from, Senator Canavan. China's inclusion of the Australia in its ADS scheme.
Minister Farrell, thank you. Order. Senator Canavan and Senator Watt. Senator Farrell, I remind you when you're answering to direct your comments to the chair. Order. Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. That is fantastic news for tourism, particularly in regional Queensland. Can the minister outline for the Senate the value of what the Chinese market to Australia's visitor economy and what further recovery of visitation from China will mean for Australian tourism businesses?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Green for her first supplementary question. And yes, I can give you an answer to that question because pre-pandemic, China was Australia's largest and most valuable inbound tourism market. In 2019, Australia received nearly 1.5 million short-term visitors from China. More than 250,000 of them were holiday makers who travelled to Australia on the ADS scheme. Those ADS travellers spent more than $500 million across Australia in 2019. The return of Chinese group tour travellers is particularly important in certain regions, and this includes tropical North Queensland. Did you hear that, Senator Canavan? Tropical North Queensland, and for some of our most iconic tourism drawcards. For example, Sydney Opera House previously received large numbers of ADS travellers.
Minister, the time for answering has expired. We'll wait for silence before I call Senator Green. Senator Colbeck. Order. 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 Senator Green, second supplementary.
Thank you, President.
Order. Order. Senator Green, please continue.
Thanks, President. The mind boggles why anyone would oppose such fantastic news. Can the minister update the Senate on what the government has been doing to ensure demand for an Australian holiday remained high in China during the suspension of the scheme?
Order. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator Canavan, I've called you a number of times, as I have you, Senator Colbeck. Senator Green, had you finished the question? Okay. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Green for her second supplementary question. The global Come and Say Good Day campaign was officially launched in China by Tourism Australia on the 29th of June 2023.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Ayres and Senator Canavan, those interjections across the chamber are disorderly. The minister is speaking. Minister, please continue.
Yeah, well, thank you, President. Senator Canavan obviously doesn't like good news in the tourism industry, but in just over a month since it was launched in China,
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Canavan. Minister, please continue.
So in just over a month since it was launched in China, there have been 66 million views of the short film and more than 1,350 media reports and around $22 million in earned advertising value. Following China's announcement today, the Australian government can prioritise the steps needed to facilitate the return of ADS travellers from China as soon as possible. The Australian tourism industry is passionate, resilient and hard-working, unlike the Coalition. Today's announcement will be welcomed by the industry as they continue to build the ongoing recovery of the sector.
Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Industry and Science, Minister Farrell. The federal government has spent $13 million on legal fees alone to try and force their nuclear waste dump on the land of the Bangala people, who spent less than $500,000 as there was no consent for this dump. How does the Labor government reconcile the vast power and resource disparity they use to deny First People their self-determination?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Thorpe for her question. And I note that I'm getting attacked from the left and the right on this issue, which makes me think that which makes me think that Madeleine King, the Resources Minister, is treading down the right path here. Obviously, the extent to which legal fees have been spent in this area has been a decision, principally, of course, in terms of the government of the previous government, but also of the Bangala people themselves. And it's not clear to me just where the situation lies in terms of costs, but I imagine that will be an issue that will be determined at some point in these proceedings. We've got an important issue here, Senator, dealing with the issue of low-level waste. Has been a difficult and
Minister
important.
Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
On relevance, point of order on relevance, President. My question was about the disparity the government are using to deny First People their self-determination.
And your question also went to legal fees. I think the minister is being relevant, but I'll continue to listen carefully. Senator Thorpe. Minister Farrell.
Well, I think it's worth noting that in the previous parliament it was the decision of the Labor Party to allow the judicial review process to be incorporated into the Kimba proposal that's led to the ability of the Bangala people to make this challenge on this occasion, which obviously has been a successful challenge. But I do make this point. There's lots of low-level nuclear waste.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. What will your government's next steps be in pursuing a national radioactive waste dump?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Thorpe for her question. Well, I did I think, go to answering that question when Senator Birmingham asked me earlier in the day. And look, it's not an easy thing to now resolve, given the decision of the under the judicial review. But like it or not, there's lots of low-level nuclear waste stored in all sorts of places in Australia, and the government, in accordance with the 2012 Act, the National Radioactive Waste Management Facility Act, which was introduced by the Labor Party, we are going to now revisit the issue under Minister King's very careful guidance to work out where we might be able to place this radioactive waste.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which ICAN won the Nobel Peace Prize for, is still not signed by the very nation it originates in. When will the government sign the treaty, as Labor has promised to do?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Thorpe for her question. And I make the point that it's probably not supplementary to the questions that have been asked in respect of Kimba and the nuclear waste facility. But the issue of treaties is not something in my portfolio. I have responsibility for trade and tourism and Special Minister of State. We are extremely fortunate in this place to have Senator Wong as our wonderful foreign minister, and I shall be...
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Point of order on relevance. The question was, when will the government sign the treaty as
yes.
promised by the government?
That's right.
I understand that the minister may not have that on hand, but if he could seek that advice from the minister he's representing.
What the minister said at the outset, Senator Thorpe, was that this second supplementary needed to be related to the primary and the first questions, and they went to low-level waste, as I understood them, and legal costs. So the third question, I would agree with the minister, is not related to the other two. He has been answering it, so this is really an invitation to the minister to answer the question, because it's not a supplementary in the true meaning of a supplementary. Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you for that clarification. I shall discuss the matter with the Foreign Minister after question time, and I will come back to you with a formal response to the question that you've asked, even though it's not in my specific area of my portfolio.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Little.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australian, Senator Gallagher. Minister, the latest edition of the Northern Land Council's Land Rights News publication includes an 8-page bumper spread on the Voice to Parliament, a full-page unauthorised ad and 4 pages of the Minister's recent Press Club address, verbatim. There is no mention of the arguments against the Voice. Is it appropriate for a taxpayer-funded Land Council to be doing this?
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you all. To begin with, I'm not aware of that publication that Senator Little outlines in her question, nor the material as it's been presented. So I think in the first instance, before being in a position to answer, I would want to I would want to see that. I don't think it's unusual that there will be discussion about the voice over the next few months as we lead up to the referendum across this country. I think there will be quite a number of articles written in quite a number of publications as organisations seek to get information out about the voice, and if they are supporting the voice, why they are supporting the voice.
Thank you, Minister. Were you on a point of order, Senator Little?
Please, it is a point of order. I appreciate the response in relation to not having seen it. The question does go to whether it is a reasonable representation to just present the no case.
And Senator Little, the Minister is being relevant to your question. Thank you. I'll invite the Minister. I think you'd finished your answer, or you. Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say that we would want to see that publication before I'm in a position to answer the question comprehensively. But I don't think it's unusual that organisations will have a view on the referendum and that they would seek to outline some of the reasons why they have made that view. I don't think that is unusual. If there is anything further I can provide, or if that publication that you quote from can be provided, I'm happy to come back to the senator.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Little, first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, in the community of Nooka, traditional owners are living in squalor, their houses are overcrowded and in urgent need of maintenance and repair. They've also been lobbying the NLC to focus on their issues. Is it the role of the Northern Land Council to help them? But why is the NLC not listening to their voices?
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister Gallagher.
Well, I don't accept that they're not listening to the local community, and I would say, and there is a difference of opinion across the chamber, as we understand it, between the view that you have around the voice and the view that we have, is we believe the voice is part of the solution to ensuring that voices of local communities are heard and that local communities have a say in response to some of the challenges that local communities face and in response to some of the priorities that those communities would seek to have the government's attention paid to, and other organisations. I mean, this is fundamental to the request through the Uluru Statement from the Heart about having a voice, having constitutional recognition and a permanent voice that is able to provide advice, that listens to the voices of local communities and is able to provide that to government. It's exactly why we believe it's an important change to get through.
Has expired. Senator Little, second supplementary.
Minister, the ANAO found Central Land Council's fraud control arrangements fall short of the minimum requirements established in the fraud rule. Members on this side of the chamber are united in forcing an inquiry into the conduct of land councils and other organisations. Why won't the government shed light on those publicly funded organisations and support our inquiry and give people a voice?
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, the government believes that land councils play an important leadership role in Aboriginal communities, that they work in the interests of their members and play a critical role in supporting economic development in some of the most remote areas of the country. The ANAO has undertaken its scheduled performance audits of the 4 Northern Territory land councils. The governance of the Tiwi Land Council, the Central Land Council have already been presented to Parliament. The report on the Northern Land Council is expected sometime in August this year, and the Minister has asked the NIAA to work closely with those land councils to progress the implementation of relevant recommendations as a priority, as is standard practice when ANAO releases a report with recommendations across government. That is the way we implement those recommendations.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Babet.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Health Minister, Minister Gallagher. Minister, earlier this week I moved a motion asking your government to establish a Royal Commission to investigate the pandemic response, which unfortunately your government opposed. Now, the Department of Health's website states that a draft WHO pandemic treaty instrument is in the works, which is, and I quote, informed by lessons learned from the pandemic. Minister, can you tell us how these lessons learned have been determined, because I have no idea, and why that approach is better than just simply having a Royal Commission? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Babet for the question and also for the heads up on his question about an inquiry into the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we've been clear that there should be an inquiry into the pandemic. We believe that it was such a massive, had such massive implications across the economy, across the community, that at the right time an inquiry will need to be undertaken. Our position at the moment is that we are still progressing through this, the pandemic. People are still becoming unwell, and management plans are still in place. And so that remains the government's focus, to ensure that we are responding to that appropriately. But we also do believe there needs to be an inquiry. I would say there's also been a number of inquiries conducted or in the process of being conducted across the states and territories as well, and that should feed into information that we would use at the federal level. In relation to the treaty, and I think there has been a lot of work, the pandemic treaty as related by Senator Babet, this was discussed at Senate estimates in pretty great length. But it is useful to be part of those international discussions about how countries responded to pandemic and to understand the lessons learnt through that. I mean, obviously, there is still the need for local lessons to be learnt as well, which the Department of Health and others would do routinely to prepare the country in the event that there is another pandemic. So there's pieces of work underway. I think we are informed by the work being done across the international community, but we don't walk away from the need for a local inquiry at the right time.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Babet, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. At the right time, that is an interesting one. Now, we saw during the pandemic a one-size-fits-all approach to public health, where restrictions were forced upon us in regards to healthcare movement, business closures, school closures, etc. Minister, how are we going to know which of these approaches benefited us and which didn't without a Royal Commission? So could you tell us potentially when you think might be the right time for this Royal Commission?
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister.
That will be to be determined by the government, but I am being clear that we do believe there needs to be an inquiry when that is determined by the government. The government made an election commitment to create a Centre for Disease Control as well, which has been funded in the budget. And the purpose of that was we didn't have one. We believed it was a gap in our pandemic response, but at the Australian Centre for Disease Control is being created to ensure that we are prepared and undertake the necessary planning and other work with a focus on preventing or managing pandemic risks, but also providing that advice to government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Babet, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Now, we just talked there in brief about the WHO pandemic treaty. I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit if we can. Now, will the WHO, will they potentially take the reins if we have another pandemic? I'm very concerned about this treaty, Minister. If you can shed some light on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And this was raised at Senate estimates, where a number of questions were asked to the Department of Health, and it was made clear that Australia would retain sovereignty regarding public health policies, and that the WHO has no legal authority to force countries to accept any of its recommendations and is only really there to provide aid and assistance at members' request. Australia would retain our powers to make decisions on our own borders and on our own public health and social measures. So I think that should give people the assurance that it's Australia and Australia's response that will guide future planning and future responses to disease outbreaks, but there is a use and a purpose behind being able to access information and learnings from the international community, which is represented through that World Health Organisation.
Thank you. Senator Payman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Today, in a move that speaks volumes about their priorities, the Coalition have tried to deny Australians access to the Albanese government's 60-day dispensing policy at a time when Australians are already grappling
Senator Payman,
with this escalation.
Senator Payman, please resume your seat. Order. 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 Senator Payman, please continue. Senator Farrell.
Senator Payman, please be given the opportunity to restate her question.
Yes, certainly. Senator Payman, please start again.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Today, in a move that speaks volumes about their priorities, the Coalition have tried to deny Australians access to the Albanese government's 60-day dispensing policy. At a time when Australians are already grappling with escalating cost of living pressures, how would this have exacerbated the financial strain on families and individuals who rely on these essential medicines? Can the Minister articulate the real-world consequences of the millions of Australians living with chronic conditions?
Thank you. Senator Payman, Minister.
Thank you very much. And I thank Senator Payman for the question, this important question around 60-day dispensing and ensuring that medicines are made cheaper for 6 million Australians who suffer from long-term health conditions and chronic conditions, that they will be able to make savings in the order of $180 per medicine per year through this change. And it is really staggering that those opposite are opposed to this cost of living measure. And we saw the ridiculous situation this morning where we saw the opposition vote against bringing their motion on, their disallowance motion, 6 times. 6 times this Senate. 6 times this Senate.
Minister Gallagher, please. Order. 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 Senator Henderson, Senator Hughes, Senator Davey. Order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. 6 times we saw that rabble over there vote against their motion, their own motion. 6 times they voted to keep medicines higher for longer for 6 million Australians, and then pretend that they have an interest in addressing cost of living measures. This is an important cost of living measure that will save hundreds of dollars per medicine for those who have long-term medication needs in this country. And then when given the room
Minister,
to move their disallowance—
Order. Order. Senators Wong and Cash. Order. Senator Wong. Minister, please continue.
And then when the Senate gives room in the program to deal with this very important motion moved by Senator Rossum, what happened? We all sat on our hands.
Minister,
sat on
please,
our hands, had
Minister,
nothing to say.
Please resume your seat. Order. Senator McGrath and Senator Hughes. Senator Hughes. Senator Hughes, how many times do you need to be called to order? Once, I would think. Minister, please continue.
So the motion now just sits there, an orphan on the notice paper, with them failing to deal with it, and they need to explain. They need to explain why they are voting.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Watt, that's really unhelpful. Order across the chamber. Order across the chamber. Order. As I have reminded senators on many occasions, if you want to make a contribution, do it at some other time in the sitting calendar. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And those opposite need to explain to those 6 million Australians that will benefit from this change why they want medicines to get higher for longer, as they did for the 5 years they didn't deal with this when they were in government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman. Order. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
Minister, why is it so important to have 60-day dispensing for medicines for conditions such as cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis? And can the minister inform the Senate of how much Medicare card holders and concession card holders will save with the beginning of the 60-day dispensing on 1 September? And furthermore, how would a delay have contradicted expert recommendations and gone against the overwhelming support from consumer groups and major doctors' associations for this reform?
Order. I beg your pardon, Senator Hughes. Minister.
Are we good?
Minister.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Payman for the supplementary. Well, as I outlined in my earlier answer, Medicare card holders stood to save up to $180 a year for eligible medicines that they take, and concession card holders will benefit by $43.80 per medicine per year. And I do acknowledge that every single patient, every major patient group, every single doctor's group supports this measure because it's good from a cost of living perspective, but also, importantly, good for people's health care by having access to medicines at an affordable level and in a way that is convenient for patients.
Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Minister, why is it important we have 60-day dispensing for Australians living with chronic conditions including cardiovascular disease, Crohn's disease, osteoporosis, diabetes, asthma, Parkinson's disease, depression, hypertension and others? How would the Coalition's position to delay have created a missed opportunity to support those battling with chronic illnesses and to modernise a system in need of reform?
Senator McGrath. Minister.
Thank you very much, President. This change is important because it's going to make medicines cheaper for 6 million Australians, and we will always be on the side of cheaper medicines.
Minister Wong.
Mr. President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice, and I seek leave